Hello and welcome to my first tier list for the combat perks in Starfield. Now I have run a build for all of these except for rifles explicitly, but I know about the weapons that are good in rifles. So for like the scoped weapons, I'm aware of what's good and where it would place generally. Now as I play the game more, I will make a follow-up video, and if I get feedback, like if someone says, you know, this build works really well on very hard mode, and they outline it to make sense, I'll adjust it in a future video. But for now, I have like 120 hours in Starfield only on very hard mode. I've run melee builds, pistol builds, shotgun builds, explosive builds, heavy weapon builds, laser builds, particle beam builds, and I started using rifles recently. I am aware of the good rifles though, so to begin, let's actually start, let's get this in order. All right, so Ballistics. So Ballistics scales any weapon that uses ballistic like projectiles, right, which are typically like hit scan. So generally speaking, this is one of the best perks for damage increase. So you get up to plus 30% damage increase. Now this includes, I think this even scales some heavy weapons like minigun and stuff like this. So this is actually a really good thing. This is good on pretty much most weapons. Like the only thing it doesn't really affect are like lasers, particle beams, things like this. And I think some explosives may not be affected. But this is generally better than getting like a specific weapon certification early, because early game you don't really have the option to pick and choose what weapons you get. So early game you're usually better off going with ballistics. Like let's say you want to run like a shotgun or a pistol build, and the game just happens to hand you like a really good legendary like rifle that uses ballistics or shotgun, and that's just like your temporary weapon until you get the actual weapon you're trying to run. Because the early chapters, or the early levels I should say, are going to be influenced by what weapons you can find, what weapons you can afford, or what weapons you can craft insofar as like upgrading specific weapons. So you can't go wrong investing in this. This is good early game, mid game, and long term. Like there's no disadvantage of running ballistics. And you also get range increased by 30%. So this is good on pistol builds, shotgun builds, sniper builds, and even some heavy weapons. This is weapon agnostic. So no matter what build you're running, you can just switch into, you know, you can spec into this. So if like long term, you're not sure if you want to run rifles or shotguns, you can just max this out before you pick either and test out to see what you prefer. All right, so for the next skill, I have a little thing here. All right, dueling. All right, I'm gonna do this in order. I have like a reference for all the stats. So dueling, I would say is like C tier, honestly. Like melee build kind of sucks. Unarmed is even worse, but melee build, I have used it and it does seem like it falls off long term and it doesn't have as many options and there's fewer perks that work with it. Now, early on, it's very rough. It's very clunky. It's very dangerous. You have to burn through a ton of healing packs, even if you're like running around and being crazy and like dashing in between cover. You have to close distance cap. You have to hit things multiple times. Enemies can bash you to interrupt you. So melee, here's what it does. All right, so first ranks, you get 25% more damage, take 10% less damage. This caps out at 50% more damage, take 15% less damage. Part of the problem with melee is there's very few damage scaling options. So like ballistics, for example, scales with things like rifle mastery, you know, pistol mastery, whatever. So you get multiple sources of damage increase as well as multiple tier 4 effects. So you get a range increase, and then pistols gives you more crits after a kill, for example. So like that's two things. This melee does give you, the dueling does give you 10% of your HP back on kill. But my melee build is literally worse than just using a shotgun with no perks. Like if I were to just use a coachman and just go for headshots and peek and not stay out in the open, it would be more effective to do that than to run an entire melee build, especially if you start upgrading it and getting perks. It's just, you just burn through health packs, and the only time it works out is when the enemies are weak. For enemies that take a lot of hits, it's terrible. It does like almost no damage, and even with like the best weapons in the game, there's like few ways to upgrade these weapons. Now there are ways to like squeeze crits out of this to some degree through other perks and physical, but generally it's just not that good, honestly. All right, the next perk. Let's see what we have. Lasers. All right, these are out of order. I have like a little video that I have all the perks so I can refer to them. All right, so lasers. Now, lasers is interesting because there are really good laser weapons. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, no, there's not. Let me rephrase that. There are really good non-laser weapons that are scaled by lasers, and those are the Nova Light Blaster and the Particle Beam Shotgun, also known as the Big Bang. So lasers scale both of those, and lasers do scale the Cutter and the Tier 4 rank 4 for lasers. You have a 5% chance to set a target on fire. Now, why is that useful? The Cutter attacks very rapidly, and certain enemies are very susceptible to fire damage, and currently, at least as of the making of this video, Terramorphs get melted by the Cutter with lasers 4. Now, that could change, but outside of that, certain enemies also get melted by the Cutter with lasers 4. Particle beam weapons with lasers, I would say, are like A tier. The Big Bang. So the Big Bang shoots 5 projectiles. It's a shotgun, and each projectile can roll for the fire chance, and each projectile can roll for crits, and it also gets a damage boost. So you get up to 30% more damage. So this is like a Big Bang / Nova Blaster perk that helps scale the damage. Maybe you get some fire. The fire would mostly be seen through like something like the Cutter. The Cutter overall, I would say, is like an A tier weapon with heavy weapons 4 and lasers 4. It can melt Terramorphs and trivialize the entire Terramorph campaign on very hard mode, which is really stupid, but it's a thing it does. If you have good headshot tracking, it can deal good damage and set just basic enemies on fire for decent damage. There are enemies that seem to be kind of resistant to fire and kind of resistant to its damage, so it kind of depends. But overall, it's a pretty decent weapon. But really, I'm putting this in A for the particle beam weapons because they're quite good. Their ammo is a little expensive, but you can always find it. Like, you can always buy it on Neon, so it's always available for you. Now, for the next perk, we have pistol certification. So pistols, I think, are pretty good. It's definitely at least A tier. So for now, let's put it in high A tier. Now, should it be an S? So, all right, so what is S tier? Let me define the things, the categories. This is OP. This is great. This is good. This is okay. And then we'll say D tier is bad. All right, so pistols are at least great. Now, they have good range for the most part compared to like shotguns. They have a little bit better range than shotguns, a little bit worse range than rifles. And there are a lot of really good pistols you can get early on. If you do the Rangers quest line, like as soon as you do like one quest for them, you do the bank robbery thing, and then you do one quest for them, they hand you like a 100 damage pistol with ammo you can easily get on Aquila. So right out of the gate, you can get good pistols. Honestly, maybe they're like low S tier. Like right out of the gate, you can get good pistols that are reliable, that can snipe, and there's tons of burst damage options. In long term, there's really good options for pistol. You have the Nova Beam, or the Nova Blaster, which is really good if you want to run a bunch of perks. There's like the Mag Pulse, I think that's what it's called. It's like a kind of shotgun pistol in a way that shoots multiple shots. That's important for rolling for crits, which we'll get into soon once we get to Marksmanship. But overall, I do think pistols are quite strong. Oh yeah, and for the perks, they do have unique damage scaling. So pistols, rank 1 is 10%, rank 2, 25%, rank 3, 50% more damage. And then pistol kills get plus 25% crit for 5 seconds. So pistols can roll for crits better than other weapons, because after you get a kill, you just have plus 25 crit chance. And if you're running a pistol that shoots multiple shots, I actually found a 1-inch punch pistol that shoots cheap ammo, but each shot shoots 4 projectiles, like four pellets, and each pellet rolls for crits. So like every time I shoot, 25% chance, I'm basically guaranteed, or more or less guaranteed based on probability, if you average it out over shots, a crit. And especially when you combine that with headshots and crit scaling, it's a pretty powerful weapon. But there's a lot of pistols that can go for big crits and just big damage in general. And right from the very early beginning of the game, you can get pretty good pistols right out of the gate consistently, which is not true of other weapons. All right, next we have shotgun cert. Shotguns, I would say, are S tier. Probably better than ballistics even. Shotguns are insane. With weapon engineering, Here's what you do. You make a scientist that has the 3 science perks like to start with, then you get a 4th one, and then you get weapon engineering 4 early. You just run a coachman. You get all your research done for your weapons. You get the coachman the hornet nest ammo and upgrade its damage. There's like the internal mod that upgrades the damage. The hornet nest ammo completely breaks the game. It rolls for crits. There's like tons of like individual attacks in it. It works. It gets scaled by shotguns. It gets scaled by explosives, and it also gets scaled by like rolling for crits. And you can headshot with it. So it's like one of the most ridiculous weapons I've ever used in the game. So much so I stopped playing on that character because it just breaks the game completely. It's really stupid. But shotguns are insane. Even outside of that, there's all these other good shotguns that are just good workhorses. And shotgun availability is fantastic because at any point in time, you can go to Neon and buy the Shoddy, which is a medium, somewhat high damage shotgun with a clip that randomly shoots explosive rounds that deal extra damage. And at any point in time, you can go to New Atlantis, the commercial district, the UC distribution center, and buy Rapid Shot, which has really good damage. It's a breach shotgun. It has good damage, good range, can headshot for huge damage. So you have like right out of the gate, as soon as the game starts, as soon as you have enough money to buy either of those weapons, you have like dramatically reduced the difficulty of the game on very hard. And then long term, you can just scale them with all these different perks, and especially with weapon engineering. And the Hornet Nest Coachman is super broken. So if you get like a good legendary Coachman or even just a generic Coachman, you can get that thing's damage up to absurd numbers and just completely destroy everything. So shotguns, I think, are one of the best things in the game from what I've observed on very hard. All right, Demolitions. So Demolitions, for the perks for shotgun, I didn't go over the perks. I'm sorry, the ranks. They're up to 30% more damage for rank 3, and then shotguns give a small percent chance to stun when you kill. I've demoed this in my shotgun perk review, and the stun, honestly, skip it, because you're going to be killing things. Now, unless you want it for boss fights, it's good for boss fights, and the chance is pretty high. So could be good. It's interesting. When you damage or when your companion damages the enemy, though, they wake up from the stun, so consider that. And I think they might accidentally damage them from time to time. But for explosives, we have to give it S tier. Is it better than shotguns? I think shotgun's a little bit better. I think explosives is an S tier because of Hornet Nest and explosive ammo. Otherwise, like grenades are just fine. But really, so here's what you get. So the first 3 ranks, 25% larger radius, 25% more damage, and then reduced damage taken from explosives by 25%. Now this includes enemy explosives and your own. So self-damage, all damage. And then rank 4 doubles it all. So you can get up to 50% larger radius. So when you shoot your attack, whatever it is, it could also be like, heavy weapons like the 40 millimeter explosive round launching weapons. It gets a bigger explosion, and then you get up to 50% more damage, and then you also can get a 50% damage reduction. Now, in some cases, even with the damage reduction, with the Hornet Nest ammo, if you point blank shoot something, you will probably still die. So even with like good armor and that damage reduction, it does so much damage, it usually will still kill you. So keep that in mind when using some of these weapons. But yeah, it's definitely insane. All right, next we have heavy weapons. So heavy weapons, it's just basic damage scaling, 10, 20, 30% for rank 1, 2, and 3. And then for rank 4, 25% physical resistance when aiming down sight with heavy weapons. Now, heavy weapons, like the cutter is a heavy weapon, arc welder, some explosive weapons, miniguns, things like this. There are good heavy weapons. Generally, I think they're a little bit worse than a shotgun. Honestly, I think they're like A tier. Maybe a little bit better than lasers. I think the shotgun's just better because the issue with heavy weapons is this. If you want to run like the explosive, like the Aquila killer or whatever the hell it's called, like that explosive 40 millimeter like grenade launcher thing, it has lower damage than a weapon engineered Hornet Nest shotgun, the Coachman, and its ammo is rarer, more expensive, and you find it in fewer quantities. So the big advantage of like an explosive shotgun or just shotguns in general is that their ammo is their ammo types are generally very common and cheap. So like caseless shell shotgun ammo is what a coachman shoots, even if it uses hornet nest rounds. So essentially what you get is cheap, abundant ammo that enemies commonly carry, that every store carries in high quantities, and you can just have like 1,000 ammo easily for cheap, and you never run out of ammo, and it's just better. Because like I literally had to spend like 20 to 30 minutes going on like shopping sprees, checking every store, just looking for 40mm ammo. And it does become more abundant like the further in the game you get, but I beat the main storyline at like level 27, and it was like uncommon to find it. So depending on your luck or your level or how much side questing you do, I still don't think it's as good. And also the other thing too is like things like the minigun. If you are really good at tracking, if you can track an enemy head with accuracy, the armor penetrating minigun, the N67 smart gun from UC Distribution, is really good. The problem with it is though, when you're using DPS weapons instead of burst damage weapons, you have to be exposed for longer. So if I'm using the hornet nest, I can peek around a corner, shoot a shot, and then go back behind cover. Like in fractions of a sec, I'll be visible for fractions of a second. So I'm drastically reducing the amount I'm exposed for. Whereas if I use like a minigun, I have to accurately track ahead. Now you can DPS things down really quickly, but you need really good aim and mechanics to do this. And for controller users, that might be asking too much. And it'd be much easier just to like shoot at the ground near them and blow them up with hornet nest ammo. So I think heavy weapons are just a little bit worse than, like, they're still good, but it definitely felt much worse than like using pistols or shotguns. Even just using it like non-explosive shotguns, like just peeking and then headshotting a dude and killing him and then going back behind cover. Like that's just so much more effective, and ammo is just more abundant, so it's hard to recommend. Like heavy weapons are decent, but a lot of Bethesda games, like in Fallout 3 and in Fallout 4, heavy weapons tend to take some time to get started. And you really suffer in those early chapters when you're like, oh, I want to use heavy weapons. And it's like, there are none. It's like, you can use the cutter. Like they give you like some dumb heavy weapon that like sucks. So that's kind of the situation. All right, Incapacitation. I'm just going to say this is bad. What does it do? All right, so EM weapons do 5%, 10%, 15% more damage. EM weapons have a 15% chance to do 300% EM damage. So EM damage is non-lethal damage that stuns things. So if you're going for like a pacifist playthrough, there's like one weapon that uses this, and it's like the Nova Blaster rifle or whatever the hell it's called. It's the Nova rifle, but it's the only weapon in the game aside from some unique weapon that does this. So it only affects one weapon, and this is basically just in the game for pacifists who do not want to kill. So you can just like knock people out for long periods of time and then just ignore them and hope your companions don't shoot them and wake them up. So, I mean, maybe if you just give your companions one of those as well, then they can't wake them up because they'll just be using the same thing you are. So you just like would be like the stun bros, you know, you just stun enemies and just run around, don't kill them. I'm not sure that you can loot enemies that you stun, and you're still using ammo. So I feel like this is just terrible in every way. It's also lacking in flexibility. So honestly, it just seems really bad. I don't think there's an advantage to using this. All right, for the next perk, particle beams. All right, this one is interesting. Particle beams, I think, are like A tier. I think they're like here. Now, I would put them up higher, but their availability is bad. So if you want to run like Big Bang, that thing doesn't even start spawning in stores until like level 15 to 20 plus. So you basically just don't get to use it until you hit like high level, or depending on how long you're playing, what you consider high level. But if you're just trying to beat the game and you're just running through the quests and stuff, you'll eventually see them. Now you can always get the Nova Blaster pistol. So if you're not running a pistol, particle beams is useless early until you get the Big Bang if you plan on using shotgun particle beams. But particle beams are scaled by lasers, particle beams, and by pistols for the Nova Blaster, and by shotguns for the Big Bang. So they're interesting in that they also have two damage types. They have physical and energy, and both are scaled by all three of the perks that affect them. So lasers and particle beams scale both the physical and the energy, and then if you're using Big Bang, the shotgun also scales it. So what does this do? 10%, 20%, 30% more damage for rank 1, 2, and 3. particle beam weapons have a 5% crit chance. So with the Nova Blaster, or I'm sorry, with the Big Bang, that 5% crit chance doesn't sound like much, but it shoots 5 shots. So each one of those shots rolls for a crit, and then if you stack that with Marksmanship, which we'll get into in probably a few minutes, you have like 20% crit chance. So, you know, if you're shooting 5 shots, like 1 in 5 crits, so that if you headshot one of those particles, you get scale damage from the headshot, and then one of those particles is probably going to crit, and multiple can crit based on the randomness, or none of them do. But it's interesting. Is it as good as other things? Definitely not. Because like the Coachman is good immediately. Like if you're just running shotguns in general, like Coachman is just always good, and then you can upgrade it to be really good. So like certain weapons start off good and remain good. Other weapons, you don't get them until so long, like, you know, so far into the game. And that's really the issue with particle beams outside of the Nova Blaster, which I would say is just decent. The problem with it is that you have to spend a ton of perk points to squeeze damage out of it. So that's, once you get it, it is good. But before you get it, it's kind of like, it's just decent. And you can get the particle beam pistol early on in Neon at any point in time. But the ammo is quite expensive, so it's kind of a thing that might bump it down in viability, in my opinion. But depending on, excuse me, depending on how many credits you have, it might not be a big issue. All right, for the next one. Rifles. All right, so rifles, I've used like a few semi-automatic rifles, and I also looked into the good rifles. I haven't run a rifle build myself yet, but the scaling is, you know, 10, 20, 30%, rank 1, 2, 3. Rank 4, rifles reload 30% faster while you're standing still. Honestly, I don't like that. Just make it, I would just remove the standing still thing. It seems unnecessary. Because, like, it's a tier 4 perk. It should be good. I feel like some of these tier 4 perks are just dumb. I would not get the tier 4 perk, honestly. I don't think reload speed matters that much in this game, for the most part. I usually just run, like, 2 to 3 weapons and just switch weapons. It's faster. But rifles... All right, so the good rifles I'm aware of are like Lawgiver for early game, if you can get it. And then there's the Hard Target, which seems to spawn like level 20 to 30. So it has like the issue of... Now there are other rifles too. There's like automatic rifles. These are like the sniper rifles. And then there's like some electromagnetic or whatever, or not electromagnetic. There's a energy-based weapon that does like high damage that spawns level 40 plus. Now for other rifle weapons, there's all these automatic weapons. Maybe those are good. I'll put it in low A tier until I test it more. Maybe it moves up. It seems like early game it suffers and doesn't have very many good options. And what I've noticed is like early game, the Cutter outperforms some of these early like DPS rifles. So it's kind of questionable. Now from what I understand, there are better rifles you get, but I'm just not sure on the availability. So I'd have to run them more. So maybe it goes up. I don't know that it's S tier. It's probably A tier. We'll see. All right, so rifles. I'll just put an A for now. And obviously if I do I will do a second tier list, and maybe after running a rifle build, they move up, who knows. All right, Marksmanship. This is a really good perk. This is like a middle game perk though. Like you can't even get it until you have so many perks invested in the combat tree. So here's what it does. Crit percent chance plus 3, 8, 15% at rank 1, 2, and 3. And then crits using non-automatic ranged weapons without a scope. It's very specific. Do double damage. This is rank 4. And those with scopes knock down enemies on the next shot. So, all right. So what does rank 4 do? So if you're using like single fire, so like shotguns, semi-automatic weapons, anything that's automatic, including things like the Cutter and Arc Welder, those are considered automatic. You get double damage with a crit. So that's very substantial. And you also get up to 15% increased crit chance. So I feel like shotguns shine here the most because they roll for multiple crit chance. So they really leverage this perk the most. Other things still get good value out of it. And with the scope thing is interesting. You get a knockdown. But if it's not a boss, you're probably just going to kill it anyways if you're using some kind of scoped weapon. Depending on what the weapon is. If it's semi-automatic, obviously the knockdown is more valuable. But if it's like a single shot burst damage. Now how good is this? So it's damage scaling, right? But it's random. But it scales your average damage. So it's at least A tier. Now it's long term. So meaning that if you're playing the game or you're doing New Game Plus or something, you're gonna want to get this. Like, this is just free damage. So it's kind of similar to like a flat damage increase if you were to average, 15% chance to deal double damage. If you average that out, is an average damage increase. So it's at the very least, I would say like here, like maybe even high A tier. Now, should it be an S tier? So is it overpowered? Of the builds I've used in it, also it does work with the Hornet Nest, and the Hornet Nest has a bunch of like tiny like explosions that roll for damage increase. So with the Hornet Nest, it could be considered overpowered with the right build. It is late or like middle game. Honestly, maybe it is overpowered with Hornet Nest ammo in certain shotguns and certain pistol builds, because you do get double damage. And if you can rig your crits, like if you can get high crit chance, pistols can get high crit chance, shotguns can roll for more attacks. Those two weapon types uniquely can pull crits out better than other weapon types, because the automatic weapon types do not benefit from marksmanship, which is, I don't know what. Just let the automatic weapons crit. It's fine. Like, just let the automatic weapon users crit. Give us more cool. I want a crit SMG build. All right, I want to do that. That's a thing I want. It's a thing we need. Crit SMG with headshots sounds like fun to me. Let them crit. All right, rapid reloading. So this one is also tier 3. So you have to have so many perks, I think like 8 or so unlocked. You have to have 8 perks in combat. Reload ballistic weapons 30% faster for rank 1. Rank 2, reload energy and EM weapons 30% faster. Rank 3, reload particle beam weapons 30% faster. 50% chance to avoid getting interrupted while reloading. Rank 4, chance on hitting enemies to increase reload speed for all weapons by 50% for 15 seconds. So how useful is this? For certain builds, it could be useful. I typically run 2 to 3 weapons, so I don't find that reloading is really that much of an issue. And also, I feel like enemies are spaced out enough in most combat encounters where I don't need to reload rapidly. Like, enemies aren't very aggressive in this game. The AI kind of hangs back and just like holds positions. So reloading quickly almost doesn't even matter. With certain builds, maybe it's okay. I think it's maybe a little bit better than melee, because all the ranged weapons are just substantially better than melee. Melee is just weird. It's just not good. You just take too much damage, like, needlessly, and it's just not fun. And also, like, in third person, it's like bugged. It has like an active bug where it's like the animations don't match up. You can't move around freely. Same thing in Fallout 4. They haven't fixed it. They're probably never going to fix it. It's going to be like that until there'll be like a Starfield 5 and the third person melee will still be bugged. All right. Sniper certification. So rank 1, scoped weapons are steadier, have less sway. Rank 2, you can hold your breath longer. Rank 3, headshots while aiming with a scoped weapon have a plus 25% crit chance. Rank 4, scoped weapons do 50% more damage when using the scope. So this is actually pretty good. Now, obviously, getting this, this is a tier 3, so it's going to be, like, getting rank 4 on this is going to take you some time. You're probably going to be like halfway through the game by the time you get this, but that doesn't mean it's not good. 50% more damage just while using a scope. Now, depending on how much you're addicted to scopes, personally, I prefer like reflex or like red dots or just irons. I don't really like scope weapons as much personally, but that doesn't mean they're bad or they can't be good. But for me, I probably would never run this. I would rather have a sniper rifle with irons. That's just, I grew up playing Call of Duty 2, all right? The World War II game, not Modern Warfare 2. So like I'm just used to iron sights. But that being said, 50% more damage is huge. Plus 25% crit chance on headshot is huge. If you add in the 15% from marksmanship, that's plus 40% crit chance when using any scoped weapon at base. So the other thing too, this can work with pistols. You could have a scoped pistol. You could be plus 25 crit from getting a pistol kill recently, and you could use a short scope. It doesn't have to be a long scope, so you could like shoot at like medium range and close range reliably. So you could be plus 50 base crit after getting a pistol kill from plus 25% crit with your pistol, the 25% crit from this, plus 15 crit from Marksmanship, so that's 65 crit. And I think there's other ways to get the crit up even higher, and then plus 50% more damage as well. Honestly, this could be S tier. This is probably S tier. Now I'd put it with like Marksmanship, because like a scoped high damage pistol has a good fire rate, very available, very easy to get. You deal, your crit chance goes through the roof because you're on pistols now, especially if you get a kill. And if you have enemies lined up, you can just keep shooting them and refreshing that 5 seconds of plus 25 crit. So you're looking at least 65 crit chance after your first kill. You can kill like a dumb enemy, you know, like a low level enemy. There's usually like a low level enemy that's easy to kill in every group of enemies. Kill the low level enemy, get your crit chance, start unloading into a legendary enemy. Especially if your scoped weapon is like closer range and you're like, you know, close up if you're good with tracking. So this could be massive damage. Honestly, this seems pretty good. This seems like it'd be overpowered with the right pistol build. Pistol specifically, probably even better than rifles because of that crit chance. So you get, you know, a 1.5 damage modifier plus the crits. Seems pretty good. And then obviously with scoped rifles, like, you know, late game, there are rifles that have huge damage, so you could leverage that as well. And you could use a shorter scope. It doesn't have to be like a long scope. All right, targeting. This one's a little weird. This is in tier 4, so requires 12 perks before you can get this. It's interesting and it's also weird. So increased accuracy in range when shooting without aiming. So shooting from the hip has more accuracy and more range. And I'm pretty sure this affects shotguns as well, and it might even tighten the cone of fire. I could be wrong, it needs tested. But basically it makes your hip fire better. And then rank 2, it also marks up to 1 enemy within 25 meters that damages you. This is so random, but it's like a thing it does. So what happens is if an enemy damages you and they're within 25 meters, you will see them through a wall. So it basically gives you wall hacks. And in my experience, the visual effect of this kind of makes it harder to see their head to line up headshots. So I actually don't like it for this reason. I actually would prefer if that aspect of the perk was just completely removed. I feel like I can find enemies well and I don't need walls for it. So, but it does help you find them. It basically gives you walls, like wall hacks. Notably, all right, rank 2, another increase in accuracy and range when shooting without aiming. So if you ADS, you lose the accuracy and the range. Marks up to 2 enemies within 50 meters. Rank 3, greatly increased accuracy and range when shooting without aiming. Marks up to 3 enemies within 75 meters. So then there's just all these glowing things you can see through, you know, cover. You can't hit them through cover, you can just see them. And then rank 4, 10% chance to disarm targets hit when shooting without aiming. Now that's interesting because if you're using an automatic weapon, like 10% chance. If you shoot, like, automatic weapons unload ammo fast, so you would be disarming anything you shoot. Now, consider that, like, if you're shooting like an alien or something, or like a terramorph, it doesn't have a thing to be disarmed, but for humanoid enemies, that's pretty decent. I like the like hipfire aspect. I don't like the walls aspect. When I've used this perk, I actually hate it because of the way it reveals enemies. It creates visual, like, fire that doesn't deal damage, but it's like blue and like red, and it's like hard to see the enemy's head. And as the enemy moves, they're kind of blurry, so it's like harder to track them. So personally, I don't like this perk for the reveal reason, like the mark reason, but I like the hip fire accuracy stuff. I'll put it in B tier. The disarm is situationally useful, but if you have enough damage, you should just be melting things anyways. So this is our first B tier. It's also a tier 4 perk. So consider, honestly, it feels like a tier 2 perk. And get rid of the marking thing. It's kind of annoying to play with. All right, armor penetration. This one's weird because it's hard to see what's happening. So I play with damage numbers on, and I've damaged, whenever I damage like an alien or something, it seems like I'm always dealing full damage, but it doesn't seem to be the case that I am. So it might work, but the damage calculation for damage numbers is just bugged. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't do anything. All right, so let me explain something. All right, so I went on this planet called Leviathan, and I had my Hornet Nest shotgun that usually blows up anything I shoot it with in a single shot. And there are these enemies, these like big green like bug enemies that have seemingly high damage resistance, and I unlocked armor penetration 3, like using console commands just to test it, just to see that if it even works. And my hornet nest damage was like low on them, and then with armor penetration 3, it still seemed to be low on them. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with this, to be honest. I don't know if this functions. I honestly don't even know if it functions. Oh, I think I skipped, hold on, I skipped one. Or did I? No, I didn't. Or no, I did. Where's the, I skipped a mid perk, I think. A tier 3, potentially? I might have skipped past it. Marksmanship, rapid reload. Oh, that is, oh, okay, I see, I haven't gotten to it yet. Okay, this is tier 3, my bad. Targeting is tier 3. All right, that's right. Okay, we're on armor penetration. We're in order now. These are the tier 4s. All right, armor penetration. So if it works and enemies have high armor values, then sure, it's good. But I've noticed this in Skyrim too. This was an issue in Skyrim. So the maces and the warhammers reduce enemy armor, right? But there's a thing in Skyrim where most enemies don't have armor value, or they have very low armor value, and they just have high health, and then if you're on a higher difficulty, they just take damage reduced. So it seems like you'd be squeezing out extra damage, but it actually turned out to be the case that for most combat, and especially against most enemies, maces and warhammers reducing armor rating did almost nothing, and it was like a waste of a perk. So it might be the same here. This might be one of those like Bethesda-isms where it just doesn't do anything. I could be wrong, maybe it does function, but what I've observed, it doesn't really seem to do much. So for now, I'll just put it in B tier until I can confirm it actually functions, and at which point, probably like low A tier. Depending on how high these enemy armor values are. Like if enemies don't have that much of a damage reduction, this is not even that good, right? If they have really high armor values, I haven't observed high armor values in enemies, personally, aside from a few aliens on random planets when I was like level 20 and they're like level 40. And that's really it. Now the level doesn't matter because like your stats are what matters, but that's just what I've observed. So like going through the main campaign, like the main storyline, using just like whatever weapons, I never felt like I needed armor penetration on very hard mode. So I don't see the value in it. Maybe it is better than I'm giving it credit for. You know, I could be wrong. Definitely let me know if you found it to be useful and why. Crippling. All right, this one. So this is another tier 4. Oh yeah, let me go over the stats really quick for armor penetration. 15, 30, 50% armor ignore. Enemy armor is decreased by 25% for 6 seconds after a crit. Okay, crippling. Human enemies have a 30% chance, increased chance to enter down state after taking enough damage. So that's vague. That's vague. That's not clear. I already don't like that. Now, it could be good. I don't know. Humanoid enemies have a 50% chance, increased chance from not naturally recover from a down state. I feel like the down state is long enough that recovering doesn't really matter. Rank 3, human enemies can now enter a down state earlier. Okay. Rank 4, previous ranks now apply to all enemy types. You now do 100% more damage to downed enemies. So this is something, like if your build is maxed out and you have everything, I would get this. This seems like it's like C tier, honestly. Now, obviously 100% more damage to downed enemies is good, but like that's rank 4, so getting ranked 4, you have to consider that this is like super endgame, and there's probably better things like weapon engineering, you know, just like all these damage scaling things. So like, let's say I'm running like a sniper pistol build. I would get Ballistics first, Ballistics 4 first, I would get Pistols 4 first, I would get this 4 first, I would get this 4 first, so this is 16 perk points. So assuming, and then also you probably want boost pack trading, so that's 17 perk points. So getting this to tier 4, when all of these are priority, all right, let's say a shotgun build, I would get this, I would get this, I'd probably get this, I'd probably get weapon engineering 4, that's also 16 perk points, because weapon engineering is tier 2, so you need 4 perks in science, potentially even more, potentially even 20 perk points. But that would be like a shotgun, explosive shotgun build. Like so many builds require so many perks, and also if I'm running shotguns, I also want crit. because, you know, each pellet rolls for crits. So I just don't see this being a priority. This is something I would do if I was like level 30 to 40, you know, like my build is completely finished and I don't need anything. I'd also rather have like max health increase, maybe more efficient healing items, so that when I use a heal, the heals for more, stuff like that. I'd rather have that over this, unless I really needed the damage. But it just, the fact that it's like vague, it's about downstate, it doesn't seem very useful. Like this is like this is something you would get very late on, I would say. All right, sharpshooting. This thing is pretty good. All right, sharpshooting, increased headshot critical damage by 50%. So shotguns and pistols benefit from this the most because they can roll for the highest amount of crits based on the shotguns with the probability. Probability meaning each individual attack has a % chance to occur. So the probability that 1 in 4 of those rolls produces a crit is much higher than a single shot weapon. And then pistols have the high crit from their plus 25% crit rate. So 50% more headshot critical damage. So if you're good at getting headshots, this is like something you should get eventually. Rank 2 increases critical damage enemy legs. This is just random. I don't know why this is even a thing. Why would I want to shoot something in the leg for crit damage? I just don't understand why that's there. But that's rank 2. Rank 3 increases all critical damage to enemies by 50% with ranged weapons. So you're getting 2. If you headshot, that's 100% more damage now. And then rank 4, critical hit kills increase your critical hit chance with all ranged weapons by 25% for 20 seconds. 25%. So if you get a critical hit kill, you now have plus 25 crit. So you can get, so I'm pretty sure you remember earlier I was talking about like all this crazy crit, you know, 65 crit on pistols. Well, how about 90% crit on pistols? How does that sound? For 20 seconds, that's like an entire firefight. That's pretty good. And then also, your crit chance is higher, so you can keep every crit kill, this refreshes. So now you're like a crit god. So this is tier 4, but unlike the other tier 4s, I think this has potential. You get 100% more crit damage, if assuming you headshot, and then you also get a long crit boost that helps you maintain your average crits, and it works with shotguns and pistols and of course rifles. It works with anything. Range critical hit kills. I think this actually works with ooh, this is interesting. If I'm reading this correctly, so all right, so marksmanship does not give you automatic crits. So we can go in a corner and cry and rest in peace SMG crit builds. However, with sharpshooting, if you kill with a different weapon, you give yourself 25% crit. Then you can whip out an SMG and start critting like a maniac. So this could enable crit SMG. Now, obviously, this is good outside of crit SMG, but this is a really good perk. You could go for the shotguns, you could go for the pistols, you can go for rifles, or you could just run pistols for the sole purpose of having high crit rate, getting a kill, switching to rifles to then crit, or switching to like automatic weapons to then crit. So this could be a way to enable any weapon to crit. Now the thing that's funny too, you might have been noticing this about a lot of these perks, it's always ranged weapons. So this is why melee is bad. Melee has like no combos. Melee is just trash in this game. Like the best thing, dueling, like with melee weapons, Wakizashi, Varun, Blade, or whatever the hell, it's not nearly as good as like the worst range weapons. It's just not. There's just too much crazy nonsense going on to justify it. All right, so where does sharpshooting lie? So 50% increase headshot crits, that's substantial. 50% increase crits to all enemies, that's substantial. And then longer crit, this is S tier. Now I would prioritize, this is a tier 4. I would prioritize this over this because you probably can't get this anyways. And this pops off tier 1, 2, or I'm sorry, rank 1, 3, and 4. Whereas this gets your crit up. So these are like medium, and long term that you would add these to a build. And this is more value than this for sure. Unless this actually functions, as far as I can tell, the armor penetration was negligible and I couldn't observe it by looking at the health bar of the enemies I was shooting, even when I got penetration 50%. Maybe it was adding extra damage. If it does, I would move that up to like high A tier. But targeting is kind of mid, whatever. Reload, I don't think is valuable. Just run 2 weapons. You don't need to reload. Run a weapon with high capacity. It just completely negates reloading. Like if you have like 20 rounds and you can kill an enemy in 2 to 3 shots, reloading faster doesn't matter. The crippling thing, this could be interesting. I feel like it's too conditional. If you deal enough damage, enemies aren't even going to be entering downstate. So like all right, so let's go over the damage boosting. This is a plus 100% crit damage. All right. And then the marksmanship, I think, is plus 50% more, right? Or is it double? Let's see, let's find it. I have a thing with all the stuff on it. Critical hits with non-automatic weapons do double damage. All right, so 100% more crit damage, 100% more crit damage, plus 200% more crit damage. So crit's already double damage. So let's say you hit 50, right? Hit enemy for 50. All right, and it crits, double damage, 100. Double damage from this, 200. Double damage from this, 400. So you turn 50 damage into 400. That is so broken. That is a lot of damage. That's insane, actually. That's an absurd amount. Is that 8 times? Yeah, it's 8 times. So 8 times damage if you just get a crit and run these. That's way better than this. That's way better than this. If this does work, you would get this after these, I would say. Because I don't think there's that many high armored enemies. Maybe late game, or maybe a new game plus, I don't know. But from what I've observed, the only high armored enemies were like random aliens on certain planets and maybe terramorphs. So maybe it's good situationally, which is the definition of B tier in my opinion. Whereas this stuff is just like, you know, always going to be useful. I will run a rifle build and test that out. I have a feeling early game it's going to be kind of whatever. It'll just be decent. It won't be like insane, it'll just be good, and then late game it'll pop off, maybe mid game it pops off. But that's it for this one. I just wanted to do a tier list for the combat perks. I don't think I'll do a master tier list where I rate all of the perks together, because that would be insane. So I'll do it per category. So because this video is almost an hour. So all right, thanks for checking this out. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.